It's not just about your coaching skills. It's also, if you're a coach, you're usually an entrepreneur. And that means you have to develop some sort of skills on that area.
Well, hello and welcome to the Amanda Kaufman Show, and we are continuing our series on the coaches that don't suck. And today I am joined by my friend Adine with MoneyMindAcademy. And Adine, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing, amazing. So Adine, why don't you take 30 seconds and introduce yourself to our dear listener, and we'll dive into some great conversation today.
Okay, well, I'm Adine. I'm from the Netherlands, which you might hear from my accent. I'm a money mindset mentor, and I like to combine the more spiritual side of money and the energetic side of money with practical application, because, well, you can't sit on your yoga mat waiting for feathers to fall down, but you also can't force it. So it's the combination. And my mission, that's maybe a nice one. I have a mission to help 1 million women become financially free. That's very important to me.
I love that. That's a fantastic mission. These are a few of my favorite things. I mean, money, mindset, spirituality, like, let's go. Let's talk about this. So, Adine, before we went live with the episode, you were telling me that you yourself have made a pivot in your career to pursue your coaching company. So I'm so curious, like, what's led you to wanting, not just wanting to, but what's led you to the service of helping 1 million women become financially free? Like, what's the story there?
Well, I used to have more of an advertising communication agency. I've always been an entrepreneur. I don't know how I would have to work for a boss. So I started out as an entrepreneur, and I still am. But at a certain point, I noticed that even though I didn't have like one boss, I had like 20 bosses who were kind of bossing me around. And I was working very hard. Well, maybe your listeners know it as well. Work hard, not get paid a lot of money, no vacations, no rest, going on. And I didn't feel any purpose. I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like what I did really mattered. And at the beginning, that was fine because I was making money and I loved like growing in entrepreneurship. But after a few years, it didn't feel so good anymore. I wasn't motivated by the money anymore. And well, if you're always working, then there's not really a lot of room for growth. And that's something I noticed that I really needed.
I love that. It's so fun because, you know, I'm now in Texas. I'm Canadian. You're, halfway around the world over in the Netherlands. And it's like the same story, though, of being in this achievement kind of pathway of, I'm getting clients, I'm doing work, I'm getting paid, and maybe even really reasonably. But if your whole life is not integrated with that vision for yourself, I still remember sitting in a seminar and hearing the seminar leader, it was Brendan Burchard, say like being an achievement without alignment. And I was like, that's it right there, right? Because I think there's a lot of societal conventions of what success actually looks like. And I call this like living by the playbook. You've got the playbook that society handed you of like, well, here's the checklist of the things that you have to do to be successful. And then you do all those things and find an emptiness or even a frustration on the other side of that. So you decided to pivot into coaching. Coaching is a really big world. There's a lot of ways you could do that. And, you did have a bit of an advantage walking in because you have so much entrepreneurial experience. So what told you money coaching? Like, why that mission?
Well, it actually started out when I was still doing my other work. And I think it's kind of universal. We had the credit crisis, the whole Lehman Brothers, everything around the world with the money. And at that time, I think it was 2010, it really hit my clients. So one client stopped with all the work that I was getting. One completely went bankrupt and one just quit his business. And that meant then that within one summer, I lost 80% of my turnover just in one go. At the time when I just bought a new house that needed a lot of renovation. So I needed a lot of money, and suddenly the money was gone, because it was exactly as you said. I had it all. I had a great house, enough money, no time to spend it, but the money was there, but I just had to do a lot for it. So I found myself in a situation where I really had to pay attention to my money. And I thought I always did the smart thing with money. And then it turned out that with my mortgage and some other things, I hadn't been as smart as I thought. So it started out as my own experience. So I learned a lot about practical money, about the mortgage I signed, about how to get rid of it or at least lower it. And I took all the steps. And at a certain point, the money was fine again. And I still felt very constricted. And I thought, well, it should be okay now, because I had a problem, I solved the problem, and why does it still feel shitty? And that was when I found out more about the mindset part. It's not just about having the money in your account, but it's also, can I feel it? Do I have like a scarcity feeling or more of an abundance feeling? And I was really tuned into the scarcity feeling. So it started out as more of an experiment for myself, a learning for myself. And at a certain point, I noticed that a lot of women, especially in the Netherlands, I'm not sure if it's the same around the world, but in the Netherlands, a lot of women don't know a lot about money. They feel like the man has to have to take care of it. And they also tend to undervalue themselves and not make arrangements for themselves, while we have a very high rate of divorce, for example. So if you look at the society as a whole, it's kind of dangerous for women not to know a thing or two about money and to have a little money. For me, it's like, I hope it makes sense to the listener, because I'm always having like different trains of thought, but it was my own experience, and combined with, in the background, I was in a very toxic relationship, but I always made my own money. So I always felt like, well, it's not the situation I want to be in, but I am in it, and I'm glad I have the money. So if the shit really hits the fan, I can get out and I can support myself. And well, the shit hit the fan, so I got out and I was able to support myself. But in that process, I noticed that a lot of women didn't have the money, but a lot of women also were in a similar situation without knowing how to get out. So it's like a gigantic pile of stuff that led me on this path.
It's a huge issue. And I just want to validate for you, women and money being like money and money education mindset is for sure a global problem. Like that's something that, yes, I'm sure you are experiencing it in the Netherlands, but it is a global challenge for sure. And gosh, you're really making me think about my own journey with money. There was a book that I read, and it changed my life, and it's called The Feminine Mistake. So there was that feminist book, The Feminine Mystique. It's The Feminine Mistake by Leslie Bennett. And I still remember reading that book, and it was just, how like universe just brings you things right on time.
Yeah.
So I came across that book right around when I was on my baby moon, which is like a honeymoon, but it's like before your child arrives, for my first biological child and my third kiddo. And that book raised the exact thing you just said, which is that a lot of women just don't point their attention towards learning how money works, how money is made, how money is accumulated, how to grow your money, and it's deferred. And what I really appreciated about that book that just sort of like shook me, my husband is a stay-at-home husband, basically.
Love that.
But he's still, aware of like how money is made, how it's accumulated, how it flows. But we had this conversation, at that point, it was over 10 years ago, around how important it is for me, Amanda, to be financially independent, not because Chris doesn't love me, not because we're planning on a divorce. We are not. But because we actually really don't know what could happen. He was just telling me an unfortunate story about a friend who, she lost her husband with a widow heart attack. Just like one day he was gone. And like there's these things that happen called life that money severely affects your capacity to handle the situation. And, like it or not, there's power dynamics with money, right? When you actually have that empowerment, that self-empowerment to make a new choice because you have the resources to do so, that's a completely different quality of life.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
so
how
good.
you
So
say that.
yeah, and so Adine, how do you work with your clients right now? Like, what have you found to be the most helpful thing to help them forward?
Well, I've noticed that a lot of people have a lot of stories about money, and those are the stories that are usually shaped in the first 7 years of their lives. They act according to those stories, but they are not really aware of them having the stories. It's like the way you look at the world. And well, I look at the world in a certain way, and you do as well. And we can talk about it and think we have the same outlook, but we don't, because we have different stories. So I always start out with what are the stories they are telling themselves about money. And I use a tool for that. I use the money archetypes for that. So it gives a peek into their unconsciousness, and it offers both the stories that are helping, but also the challenges. So it's I feel it's kind of an empowering tool, because it confirms the points that maybe are not optimal, but it also gives you certain advantages, certain strong suits which you might take for granted, and you think everyone has them, or they're not that special, but they are, and you can use them to improve your money flow. So I start out with that. Then I usually go to a very practical side, because you have to apply it. If you want to change your story, you have to notice when a story is coming up, and you can take a different course of action. And it's usually most easy to do that in practical matters. So I mostly work with entrepreneurs, because they can implement it in their business, and it's for their own money mindset, but it's also like, how do you approach your clients? What do you do in your marketing materials? It shows up everywhere, which is very fun. And then I also combine it with a little bit of human design, because that's like your personal energy, and it also influences how you work, what suits most in like, do you offer online courses, or are you more the one-on-one person? That also is different. And I'm all about building a sustainable life that's just awesome, and that you can live until you're like 100. And it's not just the little part, but it's how can I
And
create
that's
the best life for
why,
me?
yeah, and that's why you and I are now absolutely best friends. Because, I think, no, but right, I feel the same way. Like, I think hustle culture is killing us. I think that there's a lot of belief about the pain of making money, like making money is painful, or, having the responsibility attached to stewarding money is really painful. And, one of the things that has come up for me too, as you're talking, is like, I'm actually not a big human design person. Like I'm not personally sold on that. However, I have seen a lot of people go through human design and feel the empowerment to make a decision. And, making that decision, one of the things I know for sure is that success loves speed. It loves when you make a decision. It loves when you take action. It loves when you get out of sitting in the muck. And so one of the reasons why I would support somebody doing human design, if that's something that fascinates them, is to me, it doesn't really matter if it's true per se, but what can be true is your empowerment to make new decisions and to feel more conviction in what you're doing. And if you believe in human design, you should totally do it and test it out. And if you're not even sure, you should still try it and test it. I have my reasons for thinking the way that I do, but what's true either way is that you need to be in a decisive role when it comes to money. Like how you arrive there, that's up to you. So good.
Yeah.
So Adine, where are you going next? Like what are you doing to help more women and to achieve your mission of 1 million women supported?
Well, this international step is one step, of course, but In the
Welcome to
Netherlands.
your first international podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I got her first, so now you know.
Yeah. But one of the things I wanted to accomplish with the Million Women, with like creating that wave, is that the school system in the Netherlands and preferably around the world changes so that children learn about money at an early age, and they don't get
Yes.
sucked into a system that doesn't really work in this world anymore. So I kind of got this year, I got a shortcut, and I'm now also teaching children about money. So I think that's one of the big steps, because it's a shortcut, and it's like what you said with human design. When I first encountered it, I come from a scientific background. I thought, I'm going to prove this wrong. This is such bullshit. and then I dove into it, and I noticed that it helped a lot of people. And it's what you said. It doesn't matter how you get somewhere. You just have to find the thing that will help you be decisive and take the steps. And
that's 1,000% it. Because I've been in the coaching space long enough to see like a lot of different ways to find success. And human design is one of them. Enneagram is another one. I actually was trained as a core energy coach, so I got a little touch of the woo in there. But you're right. I mean, like, you just got to find something that really works for you, and you've got to go for it.
Yeah, and not use it as an excuse, because that's what I see all the time. I have those stories, I have that design, I have this, I have that. Yeah, then it doesn't work, but you have to find what works for you, and then go with it. And yeah, for me, the next step now is to create the change from the bottom up, which I thought I had to go top down. But I'm just taking every chance I get along the way, because I think it's very important that people start to be mindful about the money, and not because it's I want everyone to be a millionaire, which would be fine as well. I wouldn't object to that, but it's not about being rich. It's about being empowered to make choices for your own life, because we only have one life, and it's not even that long. And it's just,
well, and that's another thing, right? Like, women on average outlive their partners also, right?
Yeah.
So you really do need to take like that responsibility to own that future. I love it. So, Adine, what are 3 things that you feel help a coach not to suck?
Yeah. I think it's great to know that it's not just about your coaching skills. It's also, if you're a coach, you're usually an entrepreneur, and that means you have to develop some sort of skills on that area. And especially also, I know it sounds icky, but the sales part, it's very important. If you want to help people, you have to make the connection that they know that you can help them, and that they feel inspired to be helped by you.
Percent.
It's very important. I think it's also very important to keep developing yourself, but also be mindful of how you put that into practice. So not just, I'm learning all the time, I'm following every training and every course, but how can you implement it, instead of just being like, maybe even affirming that you're not enough because you have to learn all the time. So I think it's great if you keep learning, but for every step, how can I put this to use for my clients? How can I make them better by doing this?
Yeah. What am I gonna do as my homework in my real life, because I just learned this thing?
Yeah.
I love that. I think hyper consumption is for sure like also a global problem. Different topic for another podcast day. But Adine, what's the best way for people to follow you?
Well, I will be launching my English podcast channel very soon, which will be the Money Mind Mom podcast. So I think for the international people, it will be most interesting to check me out there. I hope.
Outstanding. I love it. Well, we'll make sure to include links below with Adine's social content and everything. And dear listener, don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time listening to the Amanda Kaufman Show. We wouldn't want you to miss another one. And go ahead and leave a 5-star review. Adine worked really, really hard today, bringing her best. She's crossing the ocean for you and expanding. So I think she deserves, all the stars, all the 5-star review. And that actually really helps people to find the episode that are just like you and looking for that inspiration. And go ahead and forward this to 3 of your friends. They really do need to hear that working on their money is important. Owning it is important. There's lots of different ways to get to that ownership place with your finances. And thanks for listening, listener. And thanks for coming, Adine. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you later. We'll see you in the next episode.